He blinks, and a shifting world comes back into something like focus. He feels horribly ill, more than normal for a void transit. He is lying on his back, and he twists over to be sick. He sees the vomitus slap onto the floor, thick and greasy, and the smell appalls him. Then he lies on his back again, panting. He is clammy and cold, and he shuts his eyes. His chest hurts. He does not want to be alive. That thought prompts him to force himself awake properly. Perhaps there is something he can do about that. Spite the enemy before the advent of whatever questioning or torment they have in mind. He blinks again, hard, clearing room from his eyes. He tries to get a sense of where he is and what has happened. He is inside a cell, metal-lined, metal-floored. It stinks. Some of that stink is from him. His uniform is soiled, and his various excreta reek. Foul matter is caked on every surface. The metal is heavily oxidized, stained and calcified. The floor is wet, and little bubbles pop to the surface of oily puddles. He is on a long bench, also metal, also rusting away to nothing. The lone lumen is a chain-suspended sodium lamp, as dirty as everything else. There are furry things with many eyes crawling up the walls. Dantine wipes his mouth and tries to sit up. His rib cage is the worst. He must have been hit hard there. His knife is gone, of course, as is anything else sharp. Aside from the smell, there is a taste in the air. A chemical taste, like something fermenting. He hears noises all around him, just as one always does on a starship. Noise resounds within a vessel in space from the total enclosure. Running on top of the endemic growl of engines, air cyclers, water cyclers, shield generators, and the rest. But this one is different to any starship he has been on before. He can detect horrible noises just below the grind of the machinery. Some are moans, some are repeating cries, some are unidentifiable. Dantine is not a cowardly man, but those noises make him shiver. He looks up. The cell's solitary door is opening. Weak as he feels, he clenches his fists and prepares to move. Metal shrieks as the heavy door is shoved inward. Dantine leaps, seeing something huge and blurry in the gap, and going for it. He falls short, nearly passing out the instant he moves, and collapses into his own refuse. On his knees, he feels like weeping. He can barely lift a fist, let alone do his duty and attack his tormentor. He does not resist as huge hands reach for him, lift him up, place him back on the slab. Then he is looking up into the same eyes as before, at the numbers scrawled plates, at the bizarrely parked and bloated armor.
Do not try that again,
the monster says. The voice is just as it was on Najan, like a throat submerged in oil, cracking and engine harsh. The language is also strange and hard to follow, though patently some form of Gothic.
Why don't you kill me?
Dantine croaks. The monster gives him a canister of water. He takes it and drinks greedily.
I am named Vorx, Siegemaster of the XIV Legion, called the Death Guard. You are on the ship Solace, in the care of the Lords of Silence. What is your name?
Once a thing has a name, you can no longer call him it. He becomes a person, albeit of the most warped and esoteric kind. Even in the midst of his nausea and weakness, Dantine cannot escape a sliver of awe that creeps in. This warrior is old beyond imagination. That is evident just from the way he looks, moves, and speaks. He even smells old. One of the melange of aromas this creature gives off is the kind of decay only the truly decrepit exude. There had always been rumors, never spoken of except in the most intimate company, of space marines who had turned, who had given themselves over to the ruinous powers. Most sensible people discounted the notion. A space marine could not turn, but still the gossip never went away. Dantine remembered serving with a lieutenant who swore he'd heard a definite account of this happening, with campaign names and dates. 2 weeks later, that lieutenant was summoned to a meeting with the commissariat and never returned. For most, that was proof he must have been spouting heretical rubbish. For a few thoughtful souls, though, it was enough to give them pause.
Captain Gavel Dantine, Najan, Station Resident Defense Force.
He says,
I do not think you began your career on Najan,
says Vorx.
You fought like a man who knows how to use a weapon. Is this right?
He doesn't want to reply. He wants to remain defiant, to list his name and position again, until they tire of it, and either kill him or bring in instruments of torment. Perhaps it is the eyes that do it, looking into those deep lenses, swimming with what looks like some kind of marsh gas, drains his resolve. Or perhaps it is the crushing stink, his physical weakness, the knowledge that everyone who had served with him on that world is now dead.
I served in the Astra Militarum for 15 years.
15 years.
The creature Vorx shifts so that he is standing a little further off. His movements are almost awkward, as if the bones within that colossal hulk have been warped or rearranged. Things gurgle as he shuffles, or they drip, or they weep lines of glistening liquid.
That is a long time to stay alive in service. You must have been a good soldier, Captain Dantine.
Not really.
What brought you to Najan?
He does not wish to answer this. The creature senses it and, surprisingly, lets it drop.
No matter. Every man must have his secrets.
Vorx reaches up to brush a strand of something viscous from his gorget.
I have more important questions. The world you guarded was not unimportant. It should have been better protected. There should have been ships on response patrol. There should have been distress signals sent. Why was this not done?
Dantine doesn't know. Batakaria hadn't known. He shrugs and shakes his head.
We have analyzed your records.
Vorx says patiently.
There should have been naval support and regiments of your Astra Militarum on standby. And at the very last resort, you are under the protection of a chapter of Space Marines, are you not?
There seems little point in denying that. Dantine finds he wants to talk, and that disgusts him. He had hoped to be so much stronger.
The White Consuls.
He says.
The White Consuls.
Vorx nods appreciatively.
A venerable name. Why are they not here?
Dantine shakes his head again, miserably.
Nothing works.
He mutters.
The beacon's down. The astropaths are dead. The sky's bleeding.
Why did he use that word? That's not like him. He's a soldier, not a poet. Vorx nods, taking it all in.
So you're all blind now, just as the other one said. How interesting.
Dantine scowls.
There'll be a response from someone. You'll be sent back to...
To the Eye of Terror, Captain Dantine.
Vorx says.
You know that name, I assume. It has been our home for a long time, and not by choice.
He comes closer again, and the aroma of festering meat is hard to cope with.
It was a prison, rooted into the fabric of reality. Breaking it open, it appears, has also broken everything else. Perhaps that was anticipated by those who did it. Perhaps not.
He sniffs.
I find myself disappointed. We are cast adrift, and all has already been laid waste. I have my followers to think of. They are made for a life of conquest. If I cannot give it to them, they will find someone else who can.
Dantine cannot look away, even though he wants to. He feels sick again, as if his body has been scraped empty. He does not know what to say. He does not even know what to think.
I am a great horror to you.
Vorx says. That is certainly true.
A long time ago,
Vorx says.
I was a horror to myself. The universe is full of horror. You can resist it and drive yourself into madness, or you can accept it and then begin to understand it. I would recommend the latter course, though I accept you must feel differently. For now.
The conversational tone is absurd. Dantine is seen with these things do.
Why did you come here?
He asks weakly, wishing he could think of something better to say, something more accusatory.
We did not come here by choice. The warp's winds blew us here. Before reaching your world, we had no fixed point to guide us. Now we know where we are to a degree, and can plan where to go next. It is the beginning of something unexpected.
Dantine tries to make himself angry. He tries to remember all those he saw being killed.
Why?
He asks feebly.
Not for the reason you think.
Vorx lumbers off again. He seems to feel the need to keep moving, albeit in his stilted, stumbling manner.
There is a nobler way of living. We show this to the galaxy. We demonstrate it in our bodies, and we protect them from those who would harm it. We are the bringers of the God's blessing.
Dantine stares at the monster. For a moment, he is entirely lost for words.
You killed them all.
I did not kill you.
Why?
I do not know. Ha! Do you believe that?
The monster muses.
I am a believer in fate. I recognize a conjunction when I see one. For what it is worth, that has kept me alive for longer than most, and I do not intend to turn an opportunity aside.
Why do you do it?
Dantine could feel himself losing control. He could become angry if he were not so worn out and nauseous.
You were a man once, were you not? You were a human?
I still am, of a kind.
Vorx is not looking at him.
We are all on a spectrum, Captain. You are at one end, I am at the other. We are still the same species.
You are mad.
Vorx chuckles again.
I have lost count of how many times that insult has been aimed at me. By your kind, by my kind.
He is still pacing, as if counting out steps. There are things, sluggish things, that seem to be living in his armor.
The accusation is only meaningful if you can give me some suitable account of sanity. I saw the way you lived on that world. I have seen the way Imperial citizens live on 100 worlds. If you truly believe that this is a sane galaxy, and that we are the aberrations, then I pity you. But then, you have not seen all the alternatives yet. When you do, your mind may change.
Dantine tries to clench his fist. As the monster speaks, he attempts to gather the strength to lunge at him again. When he cannot do so, he slumps against the bench, defeated.
I wish to hurt you,
He says, mournfully. Vorx stops pacing.
Of course you do. I do not blame you for that, but I cannot allow it. See, we have asked for this.
He reaches down to one of the many pouches at his belt. He rummages for a moment and then draws out a thick bag, stained black from the liquids within. He moves closer to Dantine, opens the bag, and brings something out. For a moment, Dantine does not know what it is. Then he thinks it is meat, raw meat, offered as sustenance. Then he sees that it is a heart, blotchy with blood, and that it is still beating. The grisly spectacle makes him recoil until a greater horror dawns on him. His hands fly up to his chest under the ripped jerkin of his uniform, and he feels the ridge of scar tissue there. Vorx puts the heart back in the bag and ties it to his belt again.
Your first lesson,
He says,
how are such things possible? They are not, in the only world you have ever known. But there is a greater one in which all things are made possible.
Dantine is hyperventilating. He cannot bear to touch the wound at his chest anymore. It makes him feel dizzy.
How did...
He starts,
Hush.
says Vorx, holding a stumpy, callous finger to his Vox grill as he moves back to the door.
Enough for one day. You will need to rest if you are to be of service.
How am I alive?
Vorx looks at him.
Are you sure that you are, Captain?
He opens the door and steps across the threshold.
You're insane!
Screeches Dantine, crawling after him. Then the door clangs close, and ripples travel across the watery filth on the floor. Dantine is trembling. He draws in huge breaths, unable to understand how he's still able to do so. It is a nightmare. I will wake from it soon. He tries to sing the words of the hymn, the one they recited on the barricade, to give him strength, but he cannot remember the words. He looks around, at the walls and the ceiling, at the rot and the slurry. He smells the decay, the dankness, and sees how complete his prison is. By the time he is screaming, the cell door is securely locked. Dantine's despair adds to the cacophony of voices already raised. Just one more addition to Solace's varied choir. It goes on for a long time, until unconsciousness takes him again and the cell finally slinks back into its watery, torpid well of silence.